by Ashraf Patel. He is a research associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue. Always a pleasure talking with you, Ashraf. That's a really interesting article that you have penned entitled How Africa Can Foster Sustainable Diplomacy Amid Trade Tension. So we're going to, hopefully, time permits, that we can cover almost all of the article, but let's see how far we get on this. Assalamu alaikum, welcome.
Walaikum salam. Julie, hope you're well and hope all is well.
Yeah, just trying very hard to keep warm, but be that as it may, let's move on then with the actual matter at hand, and that, of course, is world politics and how it impacts on us, and I guess the interconnectedness and the impacts globally. Let's start off with the abrupt exit of Donald Trump from the G7 summit in Canada without having side meetings with global South leaders from South Africa and, of course, India and other such countries. And also the NATO summit, where core nations committed to a 5% of GDP spending on defense amid Trump tariffs. They've cemented nationalism as the new normal. Very worrying for us, is it not? And very especially since he's come into power, it seems as if he's not only president of the United States, and I'm going to be quite sarcastic here, he seems to think he's president of the world.
Yes, Julie. I think this is what is called the new nationalism in international relations. But remember, it's nationalism mainly in the US and now mainstream Europe. What that signifies is the G7 as a core grouping for Western hegemony is in a retreat, obviously in a multipolar world order with the rise of China in particular. These Western nations, basically the colonial nations, are trying to maintain hegemony at all costs. And therefore, even if that means upending the international order post World War II, which they created, so be it. And I think that is a sign more of their decline than of any other kind of strategy. So, in this context, the article argues that nations of the G20 and BRICS and the G77, the global South, need to really reflect on this moment in order to save the United Nations system, the UN Charter, the World Trade Organization, as well as the World Health Organization. These are important multilateral institutions that are being eroded under especially the Trump administration at this point in time. So that is the thrust of the article.
You mentioned something very interesting there. You talked about the new world order post the Second World War. That's currently taking shape right now, a new world order, which is being orchestrated by Trump and other, right-wing white supremacists. So that's the one part of my question. And then we also need to look at Russia. And of course, we're going to look at China as well and their role in all of these global dynamics and developments. But I also want you to talk about Russia and the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. But please answer the first part of my question regarding the New World Order.
Yes.
Just can I interrupt you here? I need to add something else here. Very especially
Yes.
in light of Middle Eastern
Yes.
tensions, what's played out, the genocide in Palestine, and of course the current war that Trump started in Iran.
Yes, this goes back 40 years under Bush 1.0 in 1990. And that was when the term New World Order entered international relations. At the time, there had to be an invasion of Iraq under Desert Storm 1. That was a very brief victory. but that created an upending of international institutions. And as we had 9/11, most of the global international law and agreements have been upended under the guise of intervention. And humanitarian intervention has always been kind of abused by the US and the UK in particular. And nowadays, the EU as well is beginning to become more robust, meaning that with Trump tariffs, EU budgets for military has to increase to 5% of GDP, which is unheard of. Not even during World War II were nations spending that amount on arms and ammunitions. So we are entering a world of what is called militarized nationalism in the West. And this means that the global South suffers in two ways. The first is cuts in development aid. Already, US aid is being dismantled. And secondly, EU aid, which is meant to be 0.7% of GDP, that is being completely recalibrated, and there is no more development aid as we know it, meaning that all kinds of development policy now is linked to business outcomes. And if you look at the new development aid policies of Germany, of UK, of Holland, etc., it's kind of linked to business outcomes. So if they say we're going to invest in primary healthcare or education, then the counterpart of that strategy is what is in it for European health and education companies. So if they fund primary healthcare, then they want a caveat to say that we should have access to your primary healthcare procurement systems. So it has nothing to do with meeting the UN Sustainable Development Goals. It is now what is called the new normal. Now, in that context, the article argues that South Africa at this point in time cannot rely on traditional trade partners, and therefore it simply had to diversify and form linkages with strategic partners such as the St. Petersburg Economic Forum that was held 2 weeks ago. Those forums are strategic for a number of reasons. The one being the BRICS nations and the Eurasian nations are the new frontier of investment, of trade, and growing middle classes. And that is where South Africa should focus its trade and export opportunities. So that is the thrust of parts of the article.
Ashraf, let me just digress here slightly, but I think it's part of this article. And let us understand, for example, we talk about development aid, the United Nations Development Goals, and then US aid, and how this is now US aid has been withheld. We know that we here in South Africa already are bemoaning the fact that the HIV AIDS support has now been totally eroded, and we're going to have lots more sick people on our hands. That's just one such a situation that we're having to contend with. The Western nations, the United UN and USAID can argue, or probably would argue, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, is that we have been funding third world countries for as long as possible in uplifting them in these different areas. Why should our taxpayers' money be assisting developing countries? My argument to that is that you were all colonialists. You came into third world countries, you raped those countries absolutely dry. It's payback time. Do they see it that way, or do we believe that, I'm just kind of wondering how we obviously seeing this situation from very different points of view.
Yes, I think the critical scholars, such as Wallerstein, Samir Amin, these are giants of African scholars in development studies, and they have always decried the fact that there is no such thing, there never was such thing as development aid. If you were to look at the COVID crisis, essentially support through PEPFAR for TB and HIV support over 3 decades, the kind of investment is quite minuscule compared to the benefits US pharmaceutical companies make profits when they get access to our health procurement system. So while there is a positive side of primary health care, and that should be commended, yes, the other side of the trade coin is their pharmaceuticals through a World Bank and IMF conditionalities then have access to our health procurement system. As we've seen it during the COVID crisis, there was COVID nationalism, but at the same time, through the SARPA regulator, both Pfizer and J&J overcharged South Africans for vaccines and made super profits on the vaccines, up to billions and billions. So therefore, there is no such thing as development aid in health and education. They are all linked to trade and corporate profits. And this is maybe a good thing. With the withdrawal of US aid and PEPFAR, there is a positive spin. Although it's called bitter medicine, we need to say it's a good thing because we are now going to be reduced on dependencies and procurement. Yes, I think that's an interesting debate.
Okay, let's go for an ad break. When we come back, we'll talk about other issues that you've raised in this article. For example, France and its commitments to multilateralism and SDGs. Also, what I find interesting is Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Asian bloc. Canada and Australia is a very interesting one, obviously progressive Commonwealth nations with common values, and so much more contained in this article. But when we get back, you can unpack for us, inshallah.
Inshallah.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying, or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Sponsor an orphan, and you'll help support a vulnerable child to have the education they've always dreamed of, so they can build a brighter future. You'll be feeding a hungry stomach and a hungry mind with knowledge that will last them a lifetime. That's the power of an education. Sponsor an orphan now with Islamic Relief.
Dad, these Frymax chips are so tasty.
Wow, that really takes me back. My dad bought me a Frymax chips every day after school. They were my favorite when I was your age as well. Quality is at the very heart of what we do, and that's why we ensure that every Frymax packet is filled with the beautiful goodness and flavor-packed taste that you've come to expect from us since 1982. Frymax, from generation to generation.
Yasin Badat Financial Advisory. Are your financial goals feeling out of reach? Yasin Badat Financial Advisory is here to turn your aspirations into achievements. Our dedicated team, armed with a history of success, is ready to guide you through the complex nature of financial and investment planning. Whether you're a seasoned investor or new to the game, our personalized solutions cater to your unique goals and risk appetite. Trust in our commitment to transparency, integrity, and excellence. Ready to unlock a world of financial freedom? Partner with us today. Call Yasin Badat Financial Advisory at +27333462071 or visit www.yasinbadat.com. Yasin Badat Financial Advisory, guiding you to financial success.
Connect and stay ahead with Salam Media. This is Salam Media, coming to you live from South Africa.
Welcome back. We're talking with Ashraf Patel. He is, of course, sorry about that. Ashraf, are you with us? I'm not quite sure if you can hear me.
Yes,
Okay,
you audible, yes.
Wonderful. Ashraf is Research Associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue, and we're unpacking the article he has written, How Africa Can Foster Sustainable Diplomacy Amid Trade Tensions. Welcome back. We've answered one or two of those issues that you've raised in the article. Let's move on then, and let's talk about the other areas of contention in this article.
Yes, Julie. As mentioned, the article, my article then says we, as South Africa, we should develop a trade and investment policy rooted in national interest, as well as continental and global South solidarity. And therefore, we cannot work with traditional partners, especially the northern partners are now unreliable. And when the Trump tariffs kick in July, it's going to have a negative impact on African economies. So the article says we need to get into a diverse range of partners across ideological blocs. We mentioned the Russia and the St. Petersburg Forum that provides opportunities. France is another interesting case. Deputy President Mashatile visited France a month ago, and there was agreements in trade and investment and energy. France is a more reliable partner in Europe for several reasons. One is in the current genocide, more recently, it's become much more vocal on the genocide, and it has called for a ceasefire. And more fundamentally, together with Saudi Arabia, it has pushed for a Palestine conference that recognizes the two-state solution that can pave the way for a sustainable settlement. Now, that is also progressive and aligns to the South African view. Secondly, France is pushing for UN multilateralism. They had the AI summit in February that is aligned to the UN Summit of the Future. They're promoting sustainable use of AI and global governance and inclusion and sustainability of AI, as well as the world of work. These are themes that resonate with the African agenda. So that's also positive from France. And they're also hosting the annual Paris Peace Conference that looks at a range of solutions around global problems. So therefore, it can be a reliable partner in multilateralism. Then the article also says we should then calibrate to ASEAN, particularly Indonesia and Malaysia. These are nations that have recently joined BRICS as well. But more importantly, Indonesia and Malaysia collectively are 250 million people. And there is a growing middle class, and therefore we are all part of the non-aligned movement with Indonesia and Malaysia, and we aligned on most of the issues at the United Nations. And therefore, much more trade and investment with Malaysia and Indonesia. Also, we have very strong cultural relations with Indonesia and Malaysia. The first slaves at the Cape came from Malaysia and Indonesia. So these are important partners for trade, for tourism, for business development. And therefore, we
Okay,
should
Ashraf.
diversify our trade.
Okay. It's
Yes.
all very, very positive. Your article is spot on, and there's a lot of positivity underlying these suggestions regarding the different trade partners, and also the positive stance that France has now taken regarding the situation in Palestine. But is all of this doable? Let's look at time frames, not forgetting we still have to touch on the issue with Canada and Australia. They, as you've indicated in the article, are very progressive Commonwealth nations with common values. How will they serve us? And can we go into long-term trade relations with them? Will it benefit us as the global South? So those two questions, please, to be answered by you.
Yes, remember Canada and South Africa and Mexico are in the same boat regarding the Trump tariffs. We face a similar challenge with the tariffs and multilateralism. Both Canada and Australia have, at this point, fairly progressive governments, labor governments, and they are committed to the UN processes. Both nations are major investors in mining in South Africa and Africa. Although there are challenges on mining and human rights, a lot of their companies should and can improve on their record in Africa on mining and environmental damage and human rights. But they do subscribe to the Sustainable Mining Charter, the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, EITI, is a major global standard, and most of their companies do subscribe to that. So that is also something positive as we get into what is called critical minerals, which is the major challenge on extractivism in African critical minerals, is causing a lot of conflict. And if we work with these nations, we can craft a very strong new social compact on mining and sustainability, very important for our economies in Africa. I think that's positive. And we are getting better cooperation with Australia and Canada and the United Nations on major issues such as the climate change and other treaties. So I think they make for fairly decent partnerships. And also these nations are quite progressive on immigration. And that's also important for us in terms of people to people and professional trade partnerships. I think they are also positive nations to kind of deepen partnerships.
When we're talking about your article and the global South, you're talking about obviously mining and minerals. We know what's playing out in the DRC currently, and this is all about the issues there. The war that's currently ongoing there is about mining. It's about other nations wanting to get their hands on the natural resources of the country. Are we going to be seeing similar situations playing out in other parts of the global South regarding access to minerals and resources?
Yes, the DRC is at the epicenter of resource curse or resource extraction, mainly because it has critical strategic minerals such as coltan and lithium and cobalt that are essential for the green industries of the future. And there's a massive contestation between the US, China, and Europe on access to these minerals. Unfortunately, South Africa miscalculated in the DRC crisis. We could not become a trusted peace broker between Rwanda and the DRC. And I'm not sure how we calculated, but at the end of the day, we sided with the DRC, and therefore we had the the response from Rwanda, which was quite robust, and now South Africa is ejected from the DRC calculations. And we handed the advantage, unfortunately, to the US. And today, the peace process last week was signed in the US with Secretary Mark Rubio, whereas that peace process could have been signed in Pretoria under the leadership of South Africa. So we lost major advantage in Africa through strategic miscalculation in the DRC. And we are losing credibility in Africa because we don't have an African-centric foreign policy. And that's a lesson to be learned, but it's not too late. South Africa should diversify its trade and investment partnerships, work closer with the BRICS nations. We have the new development bank where loans are accessible for infrastructure development and agriculture. We could leverage that better for ourselves and for Africa. Many nations like Ethiopia, Algeria, Egypt are accessing new development bank support, and we can deepen that. Otherwise, we're going to have to compete in a very, very busy marketplace if we're not anchored in the global south.
Okay, Ashraf, let's wrap up now. So, two very, very important questions. You talk about solidarity in Latin America, and of course, in Colombia. President Gustavo Petro has showed the way of solidarity and banned coal exports to Israel. Very, very important point there. And then you make that parallel with South Africa. We've taken apartheid Israel to the ICC and the ICJ. Yet, on the one hand, we've done that, which is very commendable for us as South Africans. But on the other hand, I understand that we as South Africa are still exporting coal to Israel. So that's a direct conflict of interest. And what does that say about us as South Africans? As what does it say about our government? Can they be trusted? Why are we, playing, a double standards here?
It's interesting. Yes, I would say it's a complicated, what we call in political science, political economy. We have been very good on the political side, the foreign policy side. But as you know, in terms of big business and the mining sector are quite influential in the South African political economy. Therefore, the likes of Glencore could have struck deals in both the DRC and export contracts to Israel and other nations, therefore bypassing the political system. So that shows that we don't have a strong cohesion as a nation state, but we can work on it in terms of partnering with Progress Chile. These are strong left governments that are committed to social justice globally, be it in Palestine, be it in Africa, even Brazil. We have good links with the Workers' Party. The world economy is very integrated at financial mining levels, and therefore exports are crucial for growth of countries. So you need to have a balance between economic growth as well as solidarity. It's always going to be tensions, but we can do much, much better and learn from Colombia, for instance, is a very interesting country, fairly progressive at this point in time. We can learn from the urban systems. They have very good urbanization plans, spatial development plans, transport systems that are inclusive, and our metros can learn from nations like that. Therefore, the article talks about recalibrating trade and investment with a range of partners throughout the world so it can benefit our trade and investment trajectory, because relying on traditional northern partners, especially the US and now Europe, is not going to do us any good. And we are on a zero growth GDP at this point in time. 1 year into the GNU, we have 0.2% growth, which is stagnant growth. And we are going into an economic third and fourth quarter decline, potentially a recession towards the end of the year once the trade tariffs kick in. So we're in a very challenging moment at this point in time.
So let's wrap up then, Ashraf. And in closing, then I want to just understand regarding Trump, and he's very impulsive. He makes statements and then retracts a day or two or a few weeks later. One minute you're his enemy, the next minute you're his best buddy. So one never knows where one stands with him. It might also be psychological games that he's playing with the rest of, politics or political leaders. But having said that, do you think that he'll backtrack on the tariffs? Uh, if yes, how advantageous is it to the rest of the countries where he has threatened these tariff increases? And if it remains in place, it's going to force these countries to reinvent, reimagine themselves and how they do business with other trade partners globally. Would that not then be the natural outcome? And will that also mean that the US then loses out as far as these deals are concerned?
Uh, yes, he is in a challenging situation. And for instance, Canada, he's reimposed tariffs last week on Canada due to Canada's imposition of tax on the big tech companies. Now, we in the same boat. We under the same pressures, and we could coordinate with the likes of Canada, of Mexico, of Brazil, etc., of India. He is going to be transactional, meaning that if he were to reduce steel tariffs, we would have to give in on certain market access in certain industries. And my sense is he's going to push very hard on the social agenda, especially things like BEE and employment equity. They're going to push very hard for South Africans to dilute that. And that's going to be the trade off. And therefore, we need to recalibrate with other partners north, more progressive partners, Canada, Australia, Norway, Spain. President Ramaphosa is visiting Spain this week. Those are very progressive northern partners.
Okay,
In
Ashraf,
which we
that's where
can
we have to leave it.
recalibrate stronger partnerships based on solidarity and then regenerate economic growth and GDP growth. But currently, we're in a very stagnant situation. So the next 3 months is crucial. The next quarter is going to be crucial in how we recalibrate and
Okay, that's where we leave it,
whilst we
Ashraf.
recalibrate trade
The line is very, very bad. Let's just wrap it up there. I think we managed to extract a lot from that interview, but the line seems to be getting worse with every minute in the discussion with Ashraf. But very, very interesting discussion indeed. Ashraf Patel, thank you indeed, Senior Research Associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue. It is almost 10 o'clock, and we do have Appa Fatima Kwele standing by, and we're going to talk about the award for outstanding community impact. Can't wait to get talking to her.